our goal is to get to 1.2 million probably per center is really where we're trying to get as far as annual revenue.
That's Joe Pedatella. He owns 16 KidStrong franchises and is building 60 more.
So our first center has 860 members. They're way above the 1.2.
In our conversation, Joe gives his full playbook on what makes KidStrong such a great franchise and how he's building his business at such a rapid pace.
If you don't have to show stress on the money aspect, it allows you to make better decisions. Somebody will say, well, I don't have the money to have 2 full-time people. Well, guess what? You're never going to grow or get outside of that. But we're really not counting memberships, we're counting the impact we can have on kids. So just taking the money that we make and putting it back into the business is really what we're doing.
Is there anything you're willing to share on just how well these things can perform from a profitability or an EBITDA standpoint? If you're considering buying a franchise, go to empirespod.com for a free consultation. So I know you have 16 locations open now, targeting 22 to 24 by the end of the year. And then you just signed a 60 plus unit development agreement. So most people struggle to own and open one business. So what's going on here? Like, how are you able to do what you're doing currently?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Patrick. It's all about what I like to do is project, really look way ahead and then work backwards, right? So I think a few pieces that are real important is include your team in the process. So when we opened the first one, number one is we built the infrastructure and systems of what 5 would look like, right? And then when we got to 5, we said, now let's build it out for 25. And then part of that process was including the leadership team on, instead of like most people, I always say, don't work for me, work with me, right? And let's do the journey together and include them in the process. So they have that ownership. So when we were doing our first 5, we said, okay, now we have opportunity to grow more. Who on this leadership team, right, high level, would you guys like to do more? And they said, yes. Okay, so we said, okay, what's 25 look like? Would you like to do that? What markets would we go into and how, and build the infrastructure to do it? And then when we did that around 15, we had such great impact on the communities, the families. I said, what's the next step? Would you like to go to 100? And we actually, a few years ago, said, okay, our target is 100. So building that out and having the people be part of that, I think, is the biggest piece. Because that's what you need. You need that ownership. You need great systems to do it, but it really starts with the people piece and the vision, shared vision.
Yeah. And on any given week, just what does your day-to-day look like running what in reality is a very fast-growing startup?
It is a very fast-growing startup. We have, with 16 centers, like you just said, we have one opening up on 4/20, another one's going to be open in June, so that puts us at 18. And then we have already signed leases to get those open this year, so 22 to 24. And I think it's just organization. I think that's the biggest part of being organized and really trusting, when you hire great people, trusting them and allowing them to be in a space where they could be successful. That's one of the biggest, I think, when you're trying to scale, if you're trying to micromanage your team, you're never going to be able to grow, right? So really building out that focus and structure has really been an integral part of it.
Yeah. And I mean, how are you able to kind of let go and not micromanage? Because I think that's something most entrepreneurs struggle with and run into really early is giving up that control is really scary for a lot of people.
It is. I'd say early on, this is not my first time being in business, and early on, I was more of a manager than a leader. So what I've allowed, I think you got to allow people to fail. I think a lot of people forget that. And I think that's the most important piece is when you have the right setup for success, you got to allow people to kind of figure it out on their own as well. I kind of use an analogy. It's like kind of going bowling, but we're going to put bumpers on the guardrails, right? And I'm going to allow you to hit those bumpers, but we also don't want to, fail where we can't make it better again, right? So, but allowing them to hit the bumpers, allowing them to make mistakes, and walking them through that process is really the fun part, because then they get the aha moments and they're like, you know what? Yeah, and then they don't repeat it, right? They're learning from it. So being in a culture led by not fear, I think is the key for that to allow people to be successful. And that's happened to me in my life. So I try to emulate that back.
Yeah. And well, let's go back to the beginning, because I think, I mean, you could probably pick a bunch of different spots for where this journey began, but I know you were a personal trainer back in the 1990s. So if we go back to that version of Joe, what were your goals? Did you have this entrepreneurial bug already, and you knew you wanted to be an owner at some point, or was there a different motive in your mind at that point?
I always wanted to be entrepreneurial. I always wanted to build things. I like to build things and I like to help people. So that's always been there. And, when I started as a trainer back in the late 90s, it was all about helping people. That's really what fills my cup. And as a trainer, I was able to help, everybody that I trained. But I learned real fast that would only have a small amount of impact. So that's when I said, let me build a training team, a bunch of personal trainers that would have higher impact. Then I realized I really liked helping people, not only the people they helped, but really starts with the individual teams underneath me where I can share that knowledge and, give them a path. I think that's important to be able to help people. That kind of continues that momentum. So that's where it kind of started, and just realized I just wanted to continue that.
Yeah, and I know at some point, did you become the owner of the gym that you were a trainer at, or was it a separate gym that
No, I
you
started here in late 90s. And as I saw success in the personal training department, the owner at the time, he saw an opportunity with me to be able to just really allow me to be continue educated. And he really fueled that, where he allowed me to grow. And just, he basically, which I always say, it's easy to manage, you end up micromanaging people, you don't allow them to grow. Right? Well, he did the opposite. And he said, basically do whatever you think is right. And it allowed me to really flourish and blossom and really continue. So eventually I, was in personal training. Then I became fitness director. Then eventually I became general manager. Then I became partner. And now I currently own the entire business.
Oh, so you still own that gym today?
That's really where I use it as my headquarters. So I'm here every day. It's kind of like my office, which is a great office to be in. So,
and this is, we're going to get into the KidStrong model at some point in this conversation, but the gym, it's like a 45,000 square foot facility, right? So like totally different realm of fitness than KidStrong.
It is. It's 40,000 square feet. When I first started here, we were a primary racquetball. It was originally built in 1980 as 16 racquetball courts with a restaurant and a liquor license. And, that was real big back in the 1980s. So when I came on in the late 90s, we still had probably 8 courts still left. And it was primarily, we did have a pool at the point, but it was just more for swimming. And we didn't really have too many ancillary things for people. But I saw, one of the things that I saw early on, we had about 1,000 people come through the day. And I just wanted to give them more offerings. I figured if we can give people what they want, so they don't have to go to all these other studios or all these other health and wellness things, keep it under one roof and make it very family oriented. So slowly we converted the racquetball courts into more fitness spaces, reconfigured over time. And now we have a yoga studio, right? We have a CrossFit. We have a real great swim program. We have summer camp. So we have a massage center. So we have a big group fitness. So we have all these different programs. And that's really, honestly, for doing that for almost 30 years, that was my sandbox. I was able to actually be very entrepreneurial within the business and learn many things, and then honestly be able to take that. So KidStrong was really easy for me because I had already did all the work on all these different levels.
So it wasn't just leadership experience that this other business gave you. Like, do you think, because even though it's one location, it sounds like there's almost like many businesses or fitness departments within it. So did it prep you well for KidStrong, which is very different in the sense that it's multi-unit, right? You're building a lot of boxes versus just one massive box.
Yeah, I mean, it taught me the people piece really well and perfect. and how to scale within, even though it's one, like you said, it's one club, but I treated it like different businesses within the club. So it allowed me to say, okay, I have, 10 different businesses with under this roof. So it allowed me to work, and a lot of it is kids and families, right? So there's some similarities there. So it was also a lot of trial and error. What works on marketing, what works on connection, really train it instead of creating, customer service, create customer experience, finding out how that works, so it allowed all that to be very successful and then be able to apply it.
Yeah. Okay. And I know the discovery of KidStrong came with, I think, in tandem with your son being born. So do you want to just kind of walk through how you stumbled on the brand?
Yeah, I'm still in it. I'm in a mastermind, and we've been meeting for over the last 10 years. And within that, there was a gentleman that he was actually in Orange Theory, and he was selling his Orange Theories right before COVID. And he had came here. They actually, the whole group came here, and they were like, why don't you do another health club? Why don't you do something else? You're actually having great success, per square foot. It's just amazing culture you built, great team. Why don't you do another club? And I said, I want to do something else. I want to see what else is out there. And like you said, my son was just born, and I wanted to see what was out there. Maybe that resonated because I liked helping people. And I was like, well, my son's getting born. What's out there for children? And I couldn't find anything. And this gentleman that was selling his Orange Theories had said, okay, well, he had stumbled upon KidStrong. And it was a brand new startup. I think they had less than, 12 centers at the time. It's about 5 years ago. And it really resonated with me with having my son and, helping kids win at life. Affirmation, I'm strong, I'm brave, I could do this. I was like, this sounds great. So I said, this is something I'd like to do because, I think money's great, but that's really the byproduct. You got to do what you really love and what you're passionate about. And having that background as a trainer, helping people, I really love with kids. Now I can actually help them early on, right? Because you tend to, as a trainer, you're actually trying to fix bad habits, especially with older adults. And as children, you can actually create them and have a larger impact and a bigger ripple effect as they get older. So I connected with Matt Sharp, one of the founders, and I kind of vetted them for about 8 months, flew down there and met him. And I just loved his passion, his story. And I said, you know what? Yeah, I'd like to do this. So originally started having a few in New Jersey. I had 5 licenses in New Jersey with the first right of refusal for the whole state. And we opened the first one, which was in Waldwick. That was their 13th center. And we had tremendous success. We opened with 709 members on day one. And it just really was phenomenal to see the impact in the community and the families of really what KidStrong does.
Did you start as a customer at any point during your diligence to test the model?
I did not.
Given that
I would
you,
have loved to,
okay,
but I don't think there was anything north of Texas at the time. Again, we're 13th
okay,
one. There are over 180 now open. So
got it. As part of the diligence, were you nervous at all about the franchising aspect? Meaning, like, you're a successful entrepreneur already with your fitness club, but going to the franchise world within KidStrong means that you do have some guardrails that you kind of can't just decide, I want to do X, Y, or Z the way you could with your fitness club. So did that just the franchise agreement and being a franchisee, did that scare you at all from an entrepreneurial perspective?
you know what? It did not. And the reason why it did not is because me and Matt Sharp connected really well when I went down there. We spent some time. And it was more of a culture of he knew my background and I shared everything. And I knew what his passion was. So I felt that regardless, we were going to align and I was going to be able to help and work with them based on all my previous experience. We'd work as a team rather than here's, you just got to follow this. So it was very collaborative, and it's going to continue to be very collaborative partnership with me and with Matt and the team.
Yeah. And how did you vet the business side of the franchise at such an early stage? And I know you mentioned that your primary motivation is the impact, but you seem like a sharp guy, so I'm sure you still, vetted the business side because, last thing you'd want to do is get into something that wasn't making money, because then, I mean, at the end of the day, that would, that kind of like limits your impact, right? If you're not able to fund it and be profitable and keep growing, the impact gets cut pretty short. So how did you vet that, the scalability of this concept, given how young it was?
I think the key was honestly, Matt, it was just, I think when you meet somebody, you really you have a huge opportunity to see how authentic they are and their vision and passion, right? And then obviously it was so early, I had to trust that process. But I think what really the vetting was what the product is and what it will do and can do. So that was really understanding that, and then be able to, okay, can it be scalable, right? What's the infrastructure look like? Maybe not today at 13, but are they willing to put the investment to get it there as it continues to grow? And the answer was yes.
So is it fair to say that you took a bit of a leap of faith? And I'm asking this question from the perspective of, there's a lot of people who are interested in getting into franchises, and especially people who come from private equity or other financial backgrounds. They really struggle sometimes because the numbers aren't always there, right? Maybe they're like 85% of the way there, and they want some level of certainty in the numbers to make them feel comfortable moving forward. But the way you answer that, it sounds like you kind of just were betting on Matt, yourself, but also him and his business too. You guys would figure it out along the way.
Yeah, early on, yeah. I mean, that's not the case now. It's fast forward, but yes, early on, it was definitely very new. And I would say you nailed it perfect. I was really focused on what I know I could bring to it, my own expertise and knowledge and determination, along with Matt and the team at the time. Yes.
Yeah. Well, just to kind of ground the conversation for people who aren't as familiar with KidStrong, what is the service you're providing, right? If you're a parent and you sign your kid up, what does that class experience look like?
Yeah, I mean, number one, KidStrong it's not a gym, right? It's a developmental training program that combines physical, cognitive and character development, into one structured really program. So it's a 45-minute class. Most parents come once a week. It's not a drop off. They stay there with it because we want them to even participate in seeing their child's growth, development, and things like that. So we use the science, foundation of as well. It's real important that, neurons that fire together wire together. So we incorporate that active learning throughout the 45-minute class.
Is there a age group of kids, like a specific age range that you guys target as your core customer, and who the service is best for?
Yeah, I mean, our age range right now is basically 6 months to 11 years old, and we make each class specifically in each age band, so they're in that with that growth and organized structure.
How did I know you're not the founder, but you have a close relationship with Matt, and I believe his wife was a big part of the founding journey.
Yes, Megan. Yeah, they started the concept. Yep,
yeah, can you just, I know it's secondhand here, but I think it would still be cool just to hear, like, how did they come up with this idea for the concept?
That's great. It was, I think it was 2015. Matt and Megan, they were in Lexington, Kentucky at the time, and they really did it for their daughter, Ella. The goal was simple, just to become, for her to become stronger and more confident, and then that led them to partner with some really child development experts, and build a real structured curriculum focused on kids physically, mentally, and emotionally. Then they ended up they partnered with Lincoln Brown, which is a friend of theirs, to really help turn into a scalable business with goal of impacting as many families as possible.
Lincoln Brown, who is that? That's a person or a company?
He's a person. He's friends with Matt and Megan.
Okay. And I take it he had some business acumen or experience before this. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Super interesting how, I was coming to this more thinking much more one-dimensional, just fitness. Like, this is a fitness business, but there's a much more holistic approach here. So I got to imagine the employees who are running the classes are very critical to this business. So what do you look for in, I'm going to call them coaches. I don't know if that's what you guys call them inside the organization.
Yeah, and that team, everybody on the team is real important. But yes, that is an integral. What do we look for? they got to be outgoing, right? They got to love kids. They got to be passionate about kids and want to have impact. Those are probably the real important things that we find that lead to
Yeah.
success.
So it's more about that maybe confidence building and that passion to work with kids that that seems to be the more important characteristic relative to, say, being someone obsessed with fitness.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's not really a fitness program. It's not a gym,
Yeah.
right? It's much more than that, like you said.
Well, do you have full-time employees for that role? Because I could see there could be like people in high school who have a love of working with kids, and maybe they're a good fit, but then they're going to go off to college. But then I also think maybe there's people who are thinking of being a teacher, but this is actually a great job for them. So, do you see a certain archetype of a person that is a consistent profile for one of your coaches?
Not specifically. I think
Okay.
we have what you just mentioned. We have all those. We have
Okay.
somebody that's a phys ed teacher full time that likes to do it after. Primary. We have a lot of
Oh,
classes
yeah.
from 4:30 through 7:30. So a lot of people that already have a full time job do this after. Or we have a lot of college kids that do that in between as well. So it's really a mix. If you're really passionate around kids, that's the main thing that allows it based on each opportunity, for people to fit into their work life schedule.
Can you walk us through inside the four walls? We've talked about coaches, but I know there's other team members. So, what does that labor model look like within the four
Yeah,
walls?
within each center is going to have a general manager. Each center will have an assistant general manager. And then we have operations people that basically they'll coach as well and they'll help with the in-center lobby experience. And then we have the coaches. So that's the infrastructure for each center.
When you're building or maybe retrofitting a previous site, how big are these things? What's the square footage, and if there is construction required, do you have a certain timeline that you've seen play out for how long it takes to get one of these ready to be opened?
Yeah, we usually look for around 3,000 to 4,000 square feet, depending on the
Okay.
layout. We do have some, the workouts, the space that we run the classes. We want to make sure there's not too many columns and things like that, but anywhere between 3,000 to 4,000 square feet. Usually around 3 to 4 months from start to finish on the build out to open.
And at what point, because I know for many membership based businesses, there's a pre opening period where you can drive memberships before you open. You have the record, and by quite a stretch, if I'm correct, within the KidStrong franchise for how many members you've signed up before even opening your doors. So, can you talk a bit about that? Like what maybe the target is to break even, and then what the record that currently exists within KidStrong is?
I don't know what the current record is. I know at the time we did early on, and we still
Yeah.
may. We've opened many over 700, before we opened as far as pre-sale. And I think the key is, we're really not counting memberships. We're counting, the impact we can have on kids, and that's really what drives that. Because when we are in pre-sale, it's usually around 3 to 4 months. We want to create connections with those parents, right? Because we want to find out really what their goals are and what the needs are, and we don't rush to get them off the phone. We want to really know their children and really how we can impact and have that impact and help them. So that's really our focus. And then it spreads through the community, right? Because there's really nothing out there right now that has that impact on children that way.
When we spoke previously, I remember you said you went through an exercise with your team for, I think it was goal setting for the pre memberships. And I just thought that was really interesting, kind of how you approached it. And it was more of a mindset and just challenging the mindset of your employees to go for a more ambitious goal.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about what that was?
Yeah, when we opened Waldwick, and this carries like through our culture all the time, right? When we opened Waldwick, which was the first center, had Jenna was on the team and Taylor's on the team, and we sat down and said, okay, this is the first center in basically past Texas. Let's set a goal. And at the time, they said, well, we're going to, sell memberships. We're going to really sell these great programs to kids. What are we going to open with, right? It's real important because you want to open with a nice so you can really have an impact and give a great experience. So at the time, I believe it was 389 members corporate had opened up with. And I said to the team, hey, what do you think you want to open? What's a good goal? I like to set a goal because then you can work on how you're going to get to that goal. You kind of dissect it, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, and kind of check that. So I believe Jenna said, 400 members. I said, that's great. It's more than 389. I like that. And Taylor, I think she paused and thought about it and said 450. And I said, wow, that's ambitious. Then I just stayed quiet for a little bit. And then they both were like, what do you think? How many members you think we can open up with? And I said, 700. And I said, 700? Wait, 389, Joe, is what you said, corporate had opened up with. And I said, in life, we tend to set our goals based on others. And I don't do that, because it really ends up shortening where you can be in life and what you could do, right? So I said, if we just really focus on what the product's going to do for people, helping families, and the other thing is, let's just do 50 a week. If you do 50 a week by the time we open up, right? Because a lot of people hear something and they say, oh, I can't do that, right? It just seems so overwhelming. So I said, let's just open up one at a time, but let's set a goal not based on somebody else, right? And we tend to do that in life. There's a story, right? They talk about if you put a whole bunch of fleas in a jar and you put the lid on it, right? They can't jump out. They're gonna hit the lid. And they say when you take the lid off, the fleas won't even jump out of the jar anymore because that was what was set for them. And they actually say if they have their offspring won't jump out of the jar either, right? So with that mindset, we tend to hold ourselves back in life and everything. So I don't do that though.
I like the analogy with the fleas. I hadn't heard that before. Even so, from an experience perspective, because there's one thing to set goals and even to say, hey, like we're trying to drive impact here, but then there's like the technical side of like actually executing a pre-membership program. So did you have any prior background in that from your fitness club? I'm going to guess no, because I think it was already open, right? By the time you...
I think, yes, I did. And the reason
Okay.
why is because, remember, I opened all these new programs within the club. So I opened up we didn't have a swim school, and now we do, right? So I opened yoga center. We didn't have that. Open massage center. So I was able to practice that. And what I focused is number one is you got to have the right systems, right? You got to have the right people first. You got to have the right vision and mindset, I think is real important. But what also is the concept. People don't like to buy. People don't like to be sold, right? People like to buy things that are going to help them. So being able to carry that through, and the mentality is, working with the team early on in Waldwick it was fun. I want to create a fun culture where we're all thinking the same thing and we're all driving, the same mission. So what we would do is every day we'd actually, make calls, and then we'd listen to the calls. We'd say, what can we do better, right? What system can we create that makes it easier and better? And we would have records. Who could stay on the phone the longest with a parent? Because when we know they were engaging and creating a meaningful conversation, right? So things like that was really what allows us to be very successful. I think, like I said, most people focus on the money, right? And that's really not your focus, or should be the focus.
Are you coming up with the playbook with this location as you're doing it? Because given the early stage of the franchise, and depending on how long someone maybe has been listening to this podcast, this will or will not be a surprise. But I always try to tell people that if you're buying into an emerging brand, there is some part of the playbook figured out, but it's also going to change and iterate and evolve over time. And
it should.
it's exactly. So are you taking Matt's playbook, or are you saying, hey, like, I'm going to try some new things? And yeah, I'd love to just hear, like, yeah, was this Joe's playbook, or was this KidStrong's
This was
playbook?
My team's playbook, right? And it was the mindset, right? But it wasn't like, I was still collaborating with them and say, this is what's working, or they would see success and, Joe, what are you doing? Can you share that, right? So it was a collaboration of their foundation and just making it better, right? And based on my own experience of being in the different models that I've created within Spot 23, the health club, and just making it better, really, and taking what I applied, what worked and what didn't work.
And on that technical side of executing it, is there an area that you saw for improvement? Like I know a lot of these brands will do, meaning just any membership model, they'll run, meta campaigns, so Facebook and Instagram campaigns. Were you like, hey, like the creative here on the ads that people will see in their feed is there's a lot of room for improvement there to, maybe drive a higher click-through rate and open our pool of potential candidates? Or you mentioned the phone. So like, were you like, hey, we should be calling people and letting them know about this great service? Was there one specific area that you think initially you were like, I know this can move the needle?
No, it's kind of like James Clear. I don't know if you ever read his book,
Yep.
1%. So I think it was everything together, and it was just really focusing on making each aspect of it better, and that's what leads to really great success.
Jumping back a little bit, I'm just curious because I think the mindset that you come into this whole endeavor with it is unique, and I'm gonna guess a pretty big reason for the success that you're having and just that culture building. So I know you had a bit of a, what I would call maybe a little bit atypical childhood where you moved around quite a bit. I know you experienced a pretty big family hardship in college. Is there anything from just that experience growing up that maybe hardened your mindset and taught you that you kind of have to, I don't know, just toughened you to be able to become the leader that you are today, or is it completely unrelated?
No, I think it is, but I wouldn't say it toughened me. I think it made me more positive and more open. The way I think is, life is hard, but most people make it harder than it needs to be, right? So think about that. So it was more of the open of opportunity, and every day is to me is a blessing, right? The past already happened; you can't change that, right? The future didn't happen yet, but right now is the present. So really utilizing every day to the best you can, and really empowering people around you, I think, has allowed me to do that. Focus on that to lead to success.
Would you say, moving around a lot? I mean, I'm the opposite. Grew up in the same town from the time I was effectively born. I think I moved, when I was like a little baby, but as far as my memory is concerned, same town my whole life up until college. So anything from a relationship building standpoint, or yeah, just becoming more of a people person, do you think moving around almost helped in that regard? Because if I'm thinking about it, it's like, well, you have to start over and make new relationships every time you move. You almost got practice in that potentially.
I agree, right? You could look at it one way or the other, and I think it allowed me to be who I am today. And being in many different school systems, I think it was almost 9 different school systems, but it allowed me to really connect with people and have that opportunity and see people who they are, rather than just transactional. Really to get to know them. Even sometimes it was a short period of time, but really and then seeing how to connect with people. Sometimes it was a lot just observing, right?
Yeah.
Because we're new, so stepping back and observing, people and interaction and how they work.
How have you scaled thus far? I know you said you're at 16 locations, going to be close to 24 by the end of the year, and then you have this 60 plus unit development agreement beyond that. Has it been self financed? Have you done loans? Have you taken any investor money? How have you gone about scaling thus far?
Right now, I have no. I have an investor. I had 2 early investors. One was a great friend, and one was a friend, and was also the business partner of Spa 23. That's really how we've done it. So we self-invested into KidStrong. Currently, no debt. So just taking the money that we make and putting it back into the business is really what we're doing.
How did you think about that dynamic of taking on capital, or you're I imagine giving up some level of ownership in the business, versus just trying to do it all yourself? Is it, yeah? Like, how do you think about that balance of obviously capital unlocks the ability to grow faster and maybe take less personal risk, but then of course you are chipping away at some of your upside. So how do you balance that out for you personally?
Well, I think it's like I said earlier. I love also sharing the journey with other people. I
Yeah.
think that's fun, right? I think that's and allows better infrastructure, allows you to hire the right team, and making sure you have the funds to do that, right? So, one of the things, if you don't have to so stress on the money aspect, it allows you to make better decisions, right? But there's this balance, right? Because if you don't have ownership, sometimes you make the wrong decisions. So I think it creates a good balance.
Yeah, it's a good point. I definitely think, yeah, if you're so worried about just surviving, you might make short-term decisions or just decisions under stress that could probably
You
chip
know, a lot of
away
people,
at.
what they'll do is they'll say, okay, great, like say we need to have, you know, two full-time people, an AGM and a GM and a center, in order to grow, in order to have bigger impact on families. And somebody will say, well, I don't have the money to have two full-time people. Well, guess what? You're never going to grow or get outside of that.
Yeah, and the way you said that you've been growing this thus far, right, is like at one location you're already building the infrastructure for five. So it was that part of the calculus
Correct.
for, hey,
So
like I need some
yeah, so what
capital.
we do is we, like, for example, we know we have new centers coming on. So we want to, what I really think is real important is really investing into the team. So what we do is we'll bring on a GM and AGM way early, 4 or 5 months before we open the next center, and let them work in an existing center to get the full experience, to get the full impact, set them up for success, right? So you take the risk out of it. And people like that. They like, you know, when you can invest in them, right? And it's not just, you know, the investing in the task, it's investing in the culture. We have book clubs, so we really want to educate people. And I'm real focused on personally and professionally, right? Because a lot of people wear two different hats and in life, and they think they got to wear a work hat, and then they think they need to wear a home hat. And really, it's really one life. And once you figure that out, it becomes really easy, right? It's a lot easier.
So you don't believe in work-life balance. It's just it's all work is part of life. Life involves
I think
work.
there's
It's
life
just one thing.
balance, but I think people make the mistake when they say work life balance because you actually, what you end up doing is making it harder for yourself because every day you're living on a clock. And our society's done that to people. So it's like, I got to punch in, I got to punch out, I got to punch in, then I got to go home and do this, and I got to punch back in. You actually end up working, in my head, a lot more than not. But if you take the hat off and you just say it's one life, you actually create more balance within your family, yourself, you know. So that's what I found success.
How did you come up with that? Are you just able to separate? Like you strike me as just like an independent thinker, where you don't just get influenced by, frankly, what the herd, right? What most people in the world might just get influenced by because that's the way society is. Like, how did you come to that conclusion that, like, actually, no, like, I'm not going to buy
I
into
think that
this work
goes,
life
now that
balance
you
thing?
said that, I think that goes early on growing up, right? So one of the things I'm really good at processing, you know, observing, processing that information and data, right? Moving around a lot, doing that. So I'm able to process that and then see patterns of maybe what's not working and what is working. And what I found was that doesn't work. Like people think they're helping themselves by, you know, watching a clock, but in return, you're just holding yourself back, right? Because you end up not maybe doing what you want to do or not finishing. So I think when you're able to just look at it as one life, you'll see it's almost like the walls are gone that are preventing you to get to where you want to go.
It's interesting how what I think many would potentially turn into in their heads a whole negative experience of a childhood, and it's actually just been a positive for you. Was there anything that broke in locations 1 to 5 where you're clearly thinking steps ahead by hiring employees for, say, like location number 2 4 months before it even opens? But yeah, is there anything that went wrong that you didn't plan for when you were starting out on day one of KidStrong?
I wouldn't say. I think we're constantly changing and adapting our playbook all the time to make it better.
Yeah.
Right, we're in a position now where we're at 16, right, opening two more, and we're saying, okay, what do we have to do to make it right now? So we're able to take that information and data and make it better. So we constantly do that throughout the way. So I wouldn't say there's one thing. I think, you know, we'll look at, even from a pre-sale, we'll say, okay, what can we do that was better? Even though, right, it's like good is the enemy of great. And I think a lot of people settle on that. So we may say, great, we opened with 700. That was good. But what can we do better? Right. So we constantly do that as a team. I think we kind of reset and we like to challenge each other, you know, and, you know, that's our culture. I think be real curious and we call it, you know, we want to be able to challenge each other in a great way to try to get ahead of it. And sometimes we're a little behind, right? Is what you're alluding to. Is like what happened. But we really try to have, I think the biggest thing is having communication within the team where you can have, those conversations and be open and sometimes have difficult conversation of what's working and what's not.
How do you build that culture though of people constantly being willing to change? Because a lot of people in general, I think, want to just, there's a way of doing it. I'm going to learn it, and then that's it. Like, right? It's a lot easier to just repeat the same thing over and over again. You don't have to think as much. And when I think of, for me personally, I'll share an anecdote. I'd previously launched a startup in the franchise world for franchise data, and we ended up pivoting and doing a few other things. But I just remember, this is different given that it's a software product. But looking back on that venture, I did not do a good job of my team of building that muscle of like, hey, we're going to pivot a lot, we're going to change a lot because we're figuring it out as we go. And so when I think of like, if there was a new feature that needed to be built, right? Friction started developing between, say, myself and the product manager and the developers who had to build it to be like, hey, like we just built X feature. Why are we now building Y? So how do you train your team and communicate with your team to be able to not be emotionally tied to something, to the way things were done up until today, and maybe, hey, now it has to change?
I think it starts from the top, number one, right? And you got to be consistent with it. I think you can't lead people or manage, would be how most people do it, with fear, because then you're just going to get somebody to do the tasks and not really have ownership. And recently I said to my team is, you have 51% of the vote, right? I think you got to let them know that they can make those decisions, because then they're going to be more vocal. And like I said earlier, it's okay if we make mistakes. I think if you allow that, and number one is obviously get the right people with the right mindset. You don't want to train, you don't want to hire somebody and train them to be on time, right? You don't want to train, what I mean? Like those things I think a lot of people waste time on. So I think really finding what the core values when you hire somebody, and then being real clear of what kind of culture we are. And, do you want to be in a coaching culture that's going to challenge you, because we're moving fast. I always say we're, in a normal business, it probably is 3 years. We're probably 3 to 4 months. That's how fast we've grown, right? So, and I think you got to fill people's cups up. You got to put marbles in their jar along the way to do that, to build that trust and relationship. I think that's important. Integrity. So it's a process. It's not overnight, and build future leaders. Right?
Yeah.
And make sure you invest in the people. We spend a lot of time investing in the people. I think that's an important piece, which long term, you get great results with that. And it just feels good, right? It's like being a good human, right? It feels good.
How are you filtering though early on for that person who is going to show up on time? My most recent episode that was released was with a person who operates 2 Chick-fil-A's, and a single Chick-fil-A employs on average 80 people. And a big part of him is for his leadership team within his 2 stores is, he needs to get that right, especially given like Chick-fil-A has a very specific level of hospitality that they're looking to serve people with. So a big thing for him is using predictive indexing. Like there's a few different versions of that and companies that put out tests that you can take to kind of show you how you're wired. And then it shows your leadership style and those types of things. So are you doing anything like that within your organization, or just like, because that was a big part of his filtering process for what he thought could lead to the right fit for his org?
Yeah, we don't. I think setting the standard, right? I think there's a whole thing, right, where it's like people say, okay, Patrick, I'm going to hold you accountable. And the only person you could be accountable is for yourself. I don't want to hold you accountable, but I can set the standard. I think that's important. I think the other piece is explaining early on what that looks like, right? And saying, listen, we're here to be successful. This is what happens if you're not on time, right? We don't know if we can run the business. We don't know if somebody's coming. You're going to let all these kids down. So this is a non-negotiable for us. So I don't know what we've done in the past, but I will tell you where we are now going forward. And this is what we really want to focus on. And we can't micromanage it, because it doesn't even feel good if you're being micromanaged. So just setting that as the tone, and then just making sure you're following through with it, right? Because then people know what to expect.
Well, with that said, what does your organization look today? Because you've gone through within the 4 walls, but I got to imagine you have above store leadership and even general and administrative maybe staff to support everything going on at your currently 16 centers?
Yeah, so right now I have a COO. Her name's Lori, and she's been with me from really day one. She's been an integral part of the success, and me and her being able to challenge each other and having great conversations and planning ahead. So that's been one integral part of it as we've grown. Underneath that, we have, I guess, to the side of that would be operations, manager, which is Paul, and he helps from where's the heart of marketing to even pre-sale, even payroll assistance. So he kind of runs a lot of operations on centers. Then from there we have our area managers. So each area manager has approximately we're around 5 centers underneath them. And then from there, it's the general managers and AGMs, et cetera, at center level.
Did you develop this structure on your own, or I know, if I'm not mistaken, there's at least a handful of, because you referenced an Orange Theory franchisee early on in this conversation. I know there's a handful of Orange Theory owners who have also become KidStrong franchisees. It reminds me, what you just described is fairly typical, I'd say, for the multi-unit org structure. So have you collaborated with other franchisees on how
I
you
have
should scale, or
not,
just
I'd say
yeah?
we've built it out as we've grown and what's working and what's not. So I think there's definitely some similarities within most businesses, which is very similar to how we run it.
I think you've said this. I believe I read an article where you said this, that your goal is 100 locations long term. Is there a reason for that number? Is it just a nice round number, big goal to get to, or did that come from something
Well,
specific?
earlier I told you we incorporate the team, right? So we were at 25, and then we said what's the next one, and then I think we went to 50, I believe. And based on this year, we should have 7 to 9 open. What does that look like? And everybody on the team wants, they understand the culture we're in, and they see the opportunity. We even say, like, positions we don't have now, we're going to need even next year, right? It's going to constantly change as we make sure we have that infrastructure to what success looks like. So we put that out to the team and said, what do you guys want to do next? What does that look like? And as a collaborative team, we picked 100, right? And I think that is a nice number. It sounds nice, but it's definitely achievable within our organization. And it gives us something to kind of like, what's that North Star? But it's not just about the number. It's really about, we look at it as our whole mission is, do everything surrounded by the kids and the families, right? And what does that impact now lead to? Having 100 is, could be, 60, 70,000 kids, right? So that's real. Imagine that ripple effect that has on families down the road, as that child now is the first one to raise their hand in class or on the football field because they've built such great confidence with themselves, or they're just a better human, and they're there to help people and things like that. So I think that's really what really drives it.
And we've talked a bit about this as far as your relationship with the franchisor. But I read an article where Matt, I think verbatim, said, he considers you to be almost like you're not actually on the payroll, but maybe just from a strategic standpoint, you're effectively a part of their senior leadership team. So, what does that look like for you on a weekly basis? Is there like meetings that you just have with them constantly, or is it just sometimes you just pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I think this is something that should be implemented"?
It's both. It's both. We have a great relationship, very trusted, and we all want the same mission and vision, right? And having, me having right now 16, soon to be 18 in the next couple of months, but also I'm able to really give great information. And not only from me, it really comes from my team. My team, that all my senior leadership has been with me almost 5 years, right? So we really have, no turnover on that high level. And even our GMs have kind of grown. We've had people start part-time, now are full-time, that are growing into senior leaders. So they're in the weeds all day. And because of our culture, I'm able to pivot, try new things with corporate. I'm able to come back and what works, what doesn't, help them with operational playbooks. Because when you have that much depth and you have that mindset of a culture, we're able to really move things and kind of move them in the right way, not just fast. But we're able to apply and get real feedback and honest feedback and then also give them what works so we can roll it out, to everybody else.
Yeah, it's almost like you've been able to now build your own testing ground because you're at the scale where it's not just one location that you're trying something out, like it's multiple. So if it works in your portfolio, there's good reason to believe it could work across the system. Is there any advice you'd have for multi-unit owners who maybe are considering an emerging brand? Because to me, I think it's there's an interesting benefit to it where you came into an emerging brand, you had previous experience and success in the brick and mortar world, and a lot of people maybe look to these national, let's call it tier one brands where everything's figured out and there's not going to be any collaboration with the franchisor because it's like, hey, this is the playbook. Okay, McDonald's isn't collaborating for the most part. Their franchisees, it's like, hey, we know this is the playbook. You follow it or you don't buy into the system. But I think there's something interesting to be had for the more successful franchisee kind of being, like, I would call it like this anchor franchisee and knowledge and strategic partner to an emerging brand that does have high potential. So yeah, is there any just, I don't know, general advice that you'd have for why this path is fun and potentially more rewarding?
Well, I think it goes back to what you just said, and maybe, I don't know McDonald's and, as far as their real numbers, but I'm sure they could be better. Right. And I think, like I said, good is the enemy of great, but I think it needs to be the right strategic person and partner that can really collaborate. Sometimes we get so focused on we think we have everything right, but really we're missing it. Right. So I would say make sure your alignment is right. Make sure you have the right person that you're going to, you're working with, that what they bring to the table. I think ultimately, experience and curiosity is real important.
As far as your economics, is there anything you're willing to share on just both on the investment side and the build and the, let's call it, revenue side? I mean, I know there's published data in the FTD. I think most recent one puts it at 715K is the average unit volume, but anything you're willing to share just about, like how much it's costing to get these boxes open, and anything where you see within your portfolio where there's a certain number that just tells you, okay, like we're not necessarily overperforming, but we're doing the things that we need to be doing.
I'd say, as far as build outs, they vary, right? And, unfortunately it's not black and white. It depends on what deal you do. With landlords, they've seen some seem to want to, they'll do a full build out, and then it's obviously you don't have your expenses real low, versus some will say, here's a great box and you got to do it. So it does vary. I'd say it can go as, depending on how the build out, it can go all in. It could be as, 200,000. It could be, 700,000. So there's a big swing. Mine are typically a lot lower just because I do have a construction background. I have great partners I have the same guy we've done the first one together where I kind of GC'd and he did it. And now he does all my centers. So I think the key is to have a great relationship because he knows the model. It's real quick for him. He could turn it over and he knows what to do. So ours tend to be a lot lower than normal, I would say. But I think everybody can have that opportunity if you built the right structure. As far as, our goal is to get to, let's say, 1.2 million probably per center is really where we're trying to get as far as, annual revenue.
I figured you'd have you're not going to settle for the average as the goal.
Yeah, and it's realistic. It's realistic. If you're following, you have the great infrastructure and great systems, and you focus on really the main product is the kids and the families and your team, it's pretty easy. It's when you focus on, say, the money, you're making all the mistakes in between.
Well, I want to come back to the construction piece, but before doing that, a few episodes ago we had a Club Pilates franchisee on the podcast. He's at around 50 locations, and he mentioned, and I'd say Pilates is a much more crowded pond that he's playing in, but Club Pilates was kind of the first mover there, so he's benefited from that. He said at scale, he sees his units in the 30% EBITDA margin range, and that is for top. Again, I know this isn't a fitness concept, but I think structurally, right, it functions similarly with the membership. So, is there anything you're willing to share on just how well these things can perform from a profitability or an EBITDA standpoint?
The EBITDA standpoint, 30% is not an issue, especially at,
Yeah.
maturity, over, you're right now, we're open and cash flow positive. And then, obviously maturity should be around 2 to 3 years is what we target as far as, getting that return. It's like 2.5 to 2 years. And then full maturity, we have we have a center right now, which is our first center that has 860 members, right? So, they're way above the 1.2, way far above that. So the opportunity is there to even go far beyond that.
But back to the construction piece, that's an area where things can go wrong. So for that first time franchisee, or maybe someone who just needs improvement, how can you? I think you said that you basically acted as the GC for location number one with your construction partner. Was that basically like? Do you think it's just absolutely critical where someone really needs to know how that process works from A to Z so that they can manage the process appropriately? And honestly, I've just seen and heard of a lot of people who they get a quote from a contractor, they've never done it before, so they just accept it, and they don't necessarily know if they're paying a fair price, the right price, and things like that. They can really increase your build out cost, and then you're setting your ROI back quite a bit potentially.
People can make a lot of mistakes in that position. So I would say, I'm fortunate that I have that background, but somebody that does not, you should always get about probably 4 different quotes. And I think part of that process, you're going to learn the first person you quote, you're probably going to have less questions. By the time you get to the fourth, you're going to have a lot of questions. You're going to be able to make the better decision. So I think people need to understand that. I think most people try to go too fast and make the right choice. We slow it down, make the right choice, get 4 bids, get 5 bids, because then you're going to learn the differences, who's including what they're including, process, and get, really get to know that contractor, what they have going on in their experience. Because that's where, some will have too much on their plate, right? And then it's like they're there for a week and then they don't come back for 4 weeks. So really, can they be dedicated to your business? And that will save you a lot of time. And what's their infrastructure? Are they a GC or are they actually a full-on contractor? Because that makes a big difference too.
And what is your construction background that gave you maybe a leg up on this whole thing?
One of the things I didn't say earlier, when I was training, I was doing a lot of personal training. I was very fortunate that the people I trained for 1 hour, 5 days a week, or typically 3 days, 1 hour. And I had a lot of mentors during that process and all different facts of life, from contracting to investment banking, you name it, all in between. And what I found was the more questions I asked, because I had them for an hour while I was training them and getting results and stuff, but they also like to talk. The more questions I asked, the more they would teach me. And then when they'd see me apply it, they would give me more information. So, a lot of the people were in their 80s. So I had a lot of knowledge, and that's where a lot of my business experience came, and I would apply it. So I didn't have to learn as much because I was smart enough to realize most people have been through it and they're happy to share their journey, right? Their experience, share. Just most people don't apply it, right? So I didn't have to learn. So one of the couple of people were really big in real estate. And so I started real early, and I would buy a house and I would redo all the work and I would flip it. I would put the new bathrooms in myself. So I started doing that. And now I ended up realizing instead of selling them, I keep them. So I have a bunch of renters. But I was able to take that experience and early on and, do contracting. So I ended up tearing down my house, built my Center Hall Colonial, did a lot of the work with a friend of mine, and learned that process along the way. And I think I always have I like to learn attitude. So even throughout the construction, Spa 23 looks much different than it did when I first started working here, but I GC'd it. I use that as, okay, I'm going to take walls down. We were architects, and I took all that on and just kept on learning the process. So I'd like to be involved, but it's not a control thing. It's more of a learning thing. So I was able to take that and apply that. So it allowed me to have that knowledge or those meaningful conversations.
How maybe I'm asking the wrong question given our conversation of work-life balance versus is just life balance, but how much do you work? Because just hearing the different things you've done over the years, you have your big fitness center, now you have all these KidStrongs. I take it you probably still own some rentals. I mean, it's an impressive, it's called portfolio of businesses you've built up. Yeah, like how are you able to do it? Are you someone who just doesn't sleep much,
I actually,
or
everybody laughs because I don't. I probably sleep about 4 or 5 hours a night, always. But I
oh,
work out early in the morning, and then I usually work out late at night. I try to get 2 sessions.
you're doing double
I
sessions?
do like 4 days a week. I think it's real important. If you take care of your body, the way you eat, the way you apply it, you have more output, right? And it's just common sense. Like people don't understand that, right? It's like if you're not drinking, the next day you're going to be a lot more productive, regardless, right? But if you put good food in your body, you're more efficient, right? You sleep better, right? So I don't. But I've always been like that. My mother said even when I was little, I just always thinking.
Are you naturally wired though to be able to? Because I mean, look, I just don't think I'd function at full capacity if I after 3 to 5 nights of 4 or 5 hours sleep. Like I'm gonna start. I'm gonna be like I need a catch up night. Is what would happen. Like physically, just I don't know. Maybe it's a mental thing. But have you always been able to just
I've always been able to
like
do that, but I think everybody's different, right? And I tell
yeah
people that's the other thing is, people will say, how do you do it? Or let me try to do it. And I'm like, you need to, in life, you got to compete with yourself, right? And that's what I always do. So I would love to be able to sleep more, but I wake up at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. I'm waking up ready to go,
that's it.
running out of bed. Like basically, that's how my mind is. It's not like I wake up tired.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
drink
That's
caffeine. I don't drink coffee. I just, yeah, yeah. So,
have you ever had a coffee?
yeah, I have, but I don't, not like, I don't drink on a daily
Yeah,
basis,
it's not a habit.
weekly basis, monthly basis. No, I don't drink coffee, but I definitely tasted it. Yeah, like seeing my
Maybe there's
workouts, no pre-energy workouts. I don't.
yeah, yeah. No, I know. Some people get really into that. I've never been a fan of that.
Well, the
But
mind's very powerful, and I think we focus on so many things in life, but we don't really strengthen our mind enough. And it's amazing what you could do if you have the right mindset, the positive energy, right? I look at everything as an opportunity, or I look at everything as a challenge. I like the challenge, and I said, let me set. Can I make it so everybody wins, right? Can I win? Can Patrick win? Can consumer, customer? Let's set it up for everybody to be successful, and it just becomes a lot easier at it, right?
do you have any heroes or inspirations? The way you're talking about just the mindset and no coffee. Like I'm thinking like David Goggins, if you know who he is.
I do. I know
But
he
yeah,
is.
is there anyone who you like look up to like that?
I mean, one of the people I look up to right now is my mother. She's an incredible woman, and she has tremendous drive. I think a lot comes from there. My father early on was definitely inspirational as well. I think there's so many people though that have had that impact on me. Like when I was training, I told you all these mentors, whether it's business, whether it's mindset driven. But one of the things I also found is, like I told you earlier, is to be able to dissect that information and also gathering maybe what's not working, right? And one of the things I realized in life when I was in my 30s, I had been training for a while these people, and a lot of them were very successful. A lot of them were older. Was they enjoy life, right? So I was dating my wife at the time, and we met actually here at Spa 23 in 1998. But I realized in my 30s, I was like, life's too short. So every year we did a bucket list trip, because I saw these old people that just they were maybe just too old or not healthy enough to even enjoy life. So I think there's been definitely through my life, there's a lot of journey and challenges, but I think the hardest thing is to look in the mirror for most people. And I think they look everywhere else, right? Why didn't that happen? They look for other answers of why it didn't happen. Whereas I like to look in the mirror and say, okay, what can I work on? Like, for example, I do this thing called a wheel wealth, and I do it every quarter. And it's not in wealth as in money. Think of a clock and think, in the center of the clock is 0. And where the numbers go, it counts out to 10. So at each number, there's something that on each one. For example, spiritual, family, love, excitement, legacy, and it goes all around health, personal, and stuff like that. So I look at that and I chart it and I say, where am I in? Because it could change every quarter, right? And then I say, okay, and I try to draw a circle. It's never a circle, right? Because you have to be real honest with yourself. And then I say, what can I focus on to improve that moment, right? And sometimes you don't get it right and it comes up next quarter. It's like, why is that low again? What did I work on? So, that's helped me a lot on different things throughout myself and what I can do and have impact, right? Because it covers everything: community, legacy, life, and family and things like that. So one of the things that, a good takeaway for me on that was that a family kept on coming up low. And I was like, why is it coming up low every time, right? And it, what I thought was the answer was, okay, I'm gonna be home and be home at, I wasn't home enough for my wife, so I'll make sure I'm home. And so I said, all right, I had this big idea. I'm going to be home on Wednesday nights instead of going back to work. And I remember my wife came home and I was all excited and I had this weird smile and she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm home. She's like, I don't want you to be home. I want you to be home on Saturday and Sunday afternoon. I have my routine on Wednesdays. So I realized there was a lesson there, right? The lesson was I didn't communicate. I was assuming what somebody else wanted. And the second thing was really what she wanted me to be was more home and be more present, say on a weekend, right? So the other thing is what I did was, from that family thing was what I do now is I map out every October, November, I map out our entire family vacation time for the next year. So what I realized too is I'm really organized, which I said earlier, right? And there's always something I would put in the schedule, but I also wasn't putting, right? Because it was two separate worlds. I wasn't putting my family in that schedule because then I stick to it. And now it gives
Yeah.
them something to look forward to, me to look forward to. So that's one of the takeaways that I do, which allows the, success and balance.
Yeah, I love it. I think, yeah, there's a lot of people who unfortunately are somewhat of a just a passenger in their own life,
Yeah,
like whereas you're
exactly.
clearly just you're dialing it in, and you're
Well said.
actively
Well said.
trying.
And then it goes
Yeah,
fast, right? Time goes fast. So I
it
think you got
does.
to be able to step away and evaluate yourself. But like I said, it's hard because you have to be your own critic, right? And it's easy to blame everything
Yeah,
else, but we have so much control. And that's the other thing is I firmly believe we have so much control in life. You just got to understand it and see that path and see through all the noise, right?
well, is there a book in your head, whether it's business, life, that yeah that you think's just made a big impact on you? You mentioned the James Clear book earlier in
James
the
Clear is great.
conversation.
Yeah, I think there's Simon Sinek books are really good. I think they're really good. Jim Collins, Good to Great. That's a good book. So I think they're really good. But it starts with just having the right mindset. Like my 6-year-old son, every day he gets up and I say, who's in charge of the day? Who's in charge of your feelings? And who's in charge how you're going to make you feel? And he goes, we are, Dad. Right. So understanding that we are in control of that. And I always say, go do the hard things, right? Because nobody else wants to do them. So those are the fun things. Those are the puzzles. Those are the games. Life's like a big game and a big puzzle, I said. And it makes it fun for him, right? Because now he wants to figure it out versus trying to run away from it. It's like, you like playing games. Well, life's a big game and a big puzzle. You just got to figure it out, right? And you got to control it. So, having those things, and I tell him to always help somebody every day. And when he gets home, I'm like, who'd you help today? So just the foundation, I think, is real important, to be able to give people.
I mean, for a kid to be able to be trained to, you're flipping that mindset of, I think a lot of people have like a stress response to
Correct.
a challenge,
Yes.
right? It stresses them out, whereas you're training him to see it as positive. And yeah, I mean, if you can get that, I mean, that kid's going to go places because it just completely changes your ability to handle things in life and get, accomplish things. So, yeah, that's fantastic, man.
You got to have them, children are great. And I think, you don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive, right? I remember first when he had to be like 2, and I was going up the stairs and we have a, Seminole Colonial with the white on the wall. And I went upstairs and he was right behind me and I saw a big crayon mark on it. And at that moment, as a new parent, you can either do one of two things. You can yell at your child, right? And because you're frustrated. And I was like, looked at him and I paused for a second. I said, my son's name is Easton. I said, Easton, what's that, bud? He's like, and you could saw like, because he knew it was wrong. So I said, let's go get a sponge. Let's clean it off. And next time, use a piece of paper because then we don't have to clean it off. He never wrote on the wall again.
I think especially early on, you could really set the tone. Like I just feel like kids, when you're young, you process things. You can process things in a weird way. Wrapping up here, I know. I think it broke like the day before you and I met a week or two ago at Multi-Unit Franchise Conference, where Princeton Equity is now an investor in the brand. So for you as a franchisee who's been with this brand for basically since the beginning, I mean, Does this change the calculus at all in your head? Some people have, I'll say, strong opinions about private equity. Princeton Equity obviously has a ton of history in the franchising world.
Princeton
So
Equity is a great partner. Lincoln and Matt chose real wisely on that, and I'm excited. I think it's a great addition as they've grown and scaled and where they want to go. It's smart, right? It's smart to have a valued partner that has history that will allow you to continue to give whatever you need to get to the next phase, right? And everybody benefits, right? It's a trickle down effect. The developers are going to benefit in return. That leadership team below them benefits, right? And then in return, the parents and families benefit. So it's exciting, and it's only going to add more value and more success.
This has been a great conversation, Joe. My closing question for every guest is, what person has played a part or a big part of your success in life, but maybe doesn't get enough credit that they deserve?
Well, I mentioned earlier my mother, right? And I would say second would be my wife. I don't think you can be successful in life without having a strong partner. We've been together since 1998, so 28 years. So having somebody that's always going to be there for you no matter what, and understand who you are and rise you up, right? And bring you up along the way, I think is real important. And it's hard to be successful without that. So I would say my wife.
I love that. Well, you clearly have had an amazing start to KidStrong, and I'm excited to see you continue to grow it. So, seriously, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all your insights, because I know the audience will find it valuable.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate your time as well.
Hey guys, just a few brief closing thoughts here. I really enjoyed that conversation with Joe. I'm really grateful that he was able to dedicate some time to come on and share his story. We spend so much time on this show talking to QSR operators and restaurant entrepreneurs in general, which I love. And it's an amazing category of franchising, and there's so many successful and impressive multi-unit operators and entrepreneurs in that arena. But it's rare to find someone who's as dialed in of an operator as Joe is, in a different space, right? As you could probably tell, I kind of came into the conversation thinking KidStrong was still more of a fitness franchise than it really is. It's more about youth and child development, as Joe explained throughout that. And what he's been able to do is super fascinating, right? And the pace at which he's doing it too. I think, though, the themes are usually the same with the successful operators, right? Joe had experience in business before with that gym that he took over. And you can just kind of put the pieces together, where when I asked him about construction, he said, I have a background in construction. And when I asked him about building a team, he already had experience building teams. So it's, of course, a much different business inside the four walls, but the principles of becoming a successful multi-unit owner still apply here, even though, right, he's not serving up fried chicken or bundt cakes or whatever it may be. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. And if you want more of the non-restaurant operators, let me know. I'll try to mix them in more often. It can be harder to find guests with Joe's pedigree and, kind of the quality we look for on this show. But yeah, as always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.